Plenty of strange social experiments were hatched in California in the 1960s. But today we're going to focus on one that's really stood the test of time and remains a counterculture stronghold to this day, albeit a seemingly innocent one. I'm Kara, this is my channel, Darling Vulgarity, and on today's episode of Rebel Fashion, we're going to talk about the Renaissance Faire. Allow me to introduce Phyllis Patterson, a former public school teacher and the creator and driving force behind the first Renaissance Faire. Phyllis had moved from Memphis to Laurel Canyon in Southern California around 1960, when Laurel Canyon was becoming a major hub for artists and creatives. In going to work for the California public school system, Phyllis was faced with signing a loyalty oath.
The courses here in this strangest of all schools: espionage as a science, propaganda as an art, sabotage as a business.
Remember this term, because dollars to donuts, we will see the return of loyalty oaths for federal workers and for probably a lot of state workers in the very near future. A loyalty oath is a signed statement pledging allegiance to the U.S. government, and it was used in the 1950s and 1960s to identify dissenters, communists. Even though we think of McCarthyism and the Red Scare and the blacklists as being something that happened in the early 1950s, they didn't just go away. People in the early 1960s were still expected to sign these pieces of nonsense, and people were still being blacklisted. Phyllis wouldn't sign it. She became a stay-at-home mom instead. And she collaborated with the Wonderland Youth Center to host a theater program for kids in her backyard. On the board of this youth center sat a husband and wife couple, Doris and Robert Carnes, who were both television actors. In 1959, Doris Carnes was called to testify about alleged communist activity at the youth center. And 2 years later, the House Un-American Activities Committee, watch that one make a resurgence soon, declared that Doris and 19 other people were either communists or communist sympathizers. This put the Wonderland Youth Center in jeopardy. But for Phyllis, it became a guiding light. She was suddenly surrounded by all of these creative, capable people who had nothing to do because they couldn't get work. They were now on the blacklist. At the same time, she's ramping up this group of kids' passion for theater. So she came up with the idea of recreating an Elizabethan country fair, where not only could the kids perform, but the audience could be completely immersed in the experience. On May 11th, 1963, the Renaissance Pleasure Faire took place, thanks to the blood, sweat, and tears of a lot of creative volunteers with a lot of time on their hands. Doris Carnes was the first fair's designer of props, costumes, and scenery. Other creatives and dissenters offered up their skills, their scrap wood, and even the property on which the first fair took place in North Hollywood. Phyllis recruited a bunch of out-of-work actors to improv and just basically work the room at this fair. She helped them with their Old English accents and taught them some Elizabethan street cries.
Huzzah!
The fair offered people who were silenced by McCarthyism a place to create and speak and perform without fear. And by dressing and embracing this 16th century act and costume, they weren't just playing dress up, they were rebelling against the conformity of Cold War America. The suits, the suburban sameness, and the climate of fear in which speaking out could mean destroying your life. Sound familiar? Those attacks on free expression are not history. They are happening again today. The Renaissance Faire of then and now shows us how fashion, performance, and play can be acts of resistance. So what happened when people stepped inside the gates on May 11th, 1963? Phyllis Patterson wanted to create an immersive theatrical experience for attendees, and thanks to a whole lot of blacklisted creatives, She did it, but something else happened that she didn't expect. Visitors showed up in costume. Some of them brought instruments. It became more community than performance from that very first day. You could argue that fantasy fandom would not exist in the way it does today without Phyllis Patterson and that first Renaissance Faire. The 1960s and 1970s saw a huge revival in medieval and Renaissance fashion and style. So the first outfit I'm wearing today is an ode to that 60s Renaissance revival fashion. I've got my miniskirt dress with the Elizabethan arms and some tall go-go style boots. The reason for this Renaissance revival during the 60s can only be speculated now, but it's probably the same reason that Sarah J. Maas, the author of the Court of Thorn and Roses series, was the best-selling author of 2024. And why Rebecca Yarros, author of the Wing and Claw fantasy series, is the second best-selling author so far in 2025. Because life is hard. The real world is upsetting. In the 1960s, you turned on your television and saw actual footage of the Vietnam War. It was the first time that people who were not in the military and who didn't live in a war zone actually saw what war looked like. Fantasy gives us a break. It gives us a little bit of freedom and control in a world where we have very little freedom and zero control. It's also worth noting, Phyllis didn't create the medieval fair. She created the Renaissance Faire. The early medieval period is called the Dark Ages for a reason. Progress stopped. Feudalism took over. The church ruled with its own iron fist. Everyday people became poorer and less literate than they had under the Roman Empire. A bunch of rich old white men held all the power. That should sound familiar too. The medieval period lasted about 1,000 years, so things in 2025 aren't looking so bright for us. But then came the Renaissance. Renaissance literally means rebirth. With the Renaissance came a renewed interest and vigor in art and literature and science and discovery and progress, and a prioritization on advancement and individualism. The Elizabethan era of the Renaissance specifically is referred to as the golden age of English history. And, shocking no one, a female was in charge. Elizabeth I was on the throne. Much of the information I'm sharing with you in this video came from the book Well Met, Renaissance Faires and the American Counterculture by Rachel Lee Rubin. I highly recommend this book. It is so incredibly interesting. So in that book, the author quotes one of the first attendees of the Renaissance Pleasure Faire as saying, "The fair was the first gathering of alternative types that I knew of in Los Angeles, and it had an intellectual focus on the history of an era of awakening from the Dark Ages in Europe, as we were awakening from the Dark Ages of McCarthyism." Maybe one day our America will reawaken from the Dark Ages of MAGAism, but I digress. The outfit I'm wearing now is less historically accurate and more just something fun that I would wear to the Renaissance Faire. I got this burgundy chemise, which is 100% cotton gauze from a brand called French Meadows. None of these brands that I'm about to talk about give me anything for free. They don't give me any money. Whether or not you buy from them does not make one bit of difference to me. But they're a small brand, they're women owned. I like shouting those kind of brands out. My favorite part about this chemise, besides the fact that I could wear it to the Renaissance Faire, but I could also wear it as a nightgown because it's so comfy and breathable, is these cool sleeves. So, they each have a drawstring and tie, and you can pull them as tight as you want. And I just think that's such a nice touch that they didn't need to add. To me, it just shows they went the extra mile to create something cool and unique, and I appreciate it. This scarf is from Shovava, which I will also link. It's a woman who makes these big scarves with wings on them, so when you wear them across your back, it's like you're wearing a set of angel wings or bird wings or butterfly wings, and they're gorgeous. And this super cool sword necklace and snake ring are both from Regal Rose Jewelry. Since its inception, the Renaissance Faire has also been a safe haven for anybody who feels out of place within mainstream culture. Theater kid energy isn't just tolerated, it is celebrated. The louder, the stranger, the more theatrical you are, the more you belong. The fair has always attracted people who did not fit into the rigid confines of mainstream society. It was in fact created by those people. So of course, through the years, plenty of non-binary and queer people have found a home there and space to experiment with identity, which we all need, whether or not we're members of the LGBTQ community. When you're dressed as a fairy or a pirate or a princess or a tavern wench or a knight or Gollum, you are free to blur gender lines, swap roles, and create a new self to try on and have fun with. Today's culture polices gender and sexuality. And the fair is a safe haven that says, wear what you want, be who you want, come have a drink with us, watch a joust. Going back to the book Well Met, the author Rachel Lee Rubin describes the fair as a place to be out. In terms of sexuality, yes, but also in terms of creativity, individuality, truth. She says for many people, the fair became the first place they could really breathe and feel like their authentic selves, which is an incredibly powerful thing. It is no accident that the fair grew alongside American counterculture and gay liberation movements. Both were about tearing down norms, creating your chosen families, and making joy itself a form of protest. And every weekend at the fair, that legacy continues. So for this outfit, I went for a little more of an androgynous look. It's just a white button-down shirt that I got at the thrift store in the men's section. The vest is from La Femme Noire. It was part of their Corpse Bride collection. I love this vest. I wear it so much. I threw on a random black belt over top of a pair of black bloomer pants. And I'm just wearing those same knee-high fry boots that I got off Poshmark forever ago. Okay, I am not sure how this last outfit turned out. I was going for Woodland Fairy, and I think I landed on Mother Mary.
Hail Mary, full of grace.
I remember going to the Renaissance Festival in my state when I was a kid, like preteen, teenage years. I was super into Shakespeare and theater and the Brian Froud Good Fairies, Bad Fairies books. The Ren Fest season in California remains in the spring, as the first one was. But here on the East Coast, it's always been in the fall. I've always known it as a fall activity. So I went again last weekend for the first time in many years. I brought my 5-year-old son and my husband. Neither one of them had ever been to one before, and we all had such a blast. It was much, much more crowded than it ever was when I went as a kid. But that warms my heart because it tells me that there are more dissenters and weirdos and theater kids than ever before. Huzzah! Again, this was meant to be my fairy outfit, sans wings. I think I wore this sparkly gold fringe shawl for my first homecoming in like 9th or 10th grade, and I've kept it ever since because I think it's such a fun piece. I've got I think it's an angelite crystal, and the dress is a silky dress. I paired it with some cute little ballet flats. I feel like I'm probably too old to be wearing a dress this short, but screw it. One of the beautiful parts of the Renaissance Faire is that you can wear whatever you want, and nobody bats an eye. Thank you so much for watching my video today. If you enjoyed this, then definitely check out my Rebel Fashion playlist, which tells the story of social and cultural and political dissenters through the lens of fashion. I will be making more videos in this series, so be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, and I'll see you next time.